I do really like that idea. I'd never even thought of the idea of reading news in Spanish. I can't believe I never it
It's
just never
really
it never
helpful.
popped into my head. It never came to me. It's like, oh, that's something you could try, I guess I always thought like newspapers would be too difficult for me at my level,
The thing is that like newspapers are generally written in declarative sentences. Like they're generally a declarative statement,
Yeah, yeah.
and like this happened here. This person said this about that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the New York Times
El
is
Presidente
famously,
dice,
yeah. The New York Times is famously written, like between a 10th and 12th grade reading level.
yeah.
Many newspapers around the world are written at somewhat higher reading levels, but still, like a lot of it is going to be pretty legible.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, if you want, I can send you some lists of newspapers
Yeah,
and
no.
news sources in other countries that I follow sometimes.
If you got some stuff that you would like to, I mean, I wouldn't ask you to do work for
Would
me,
be
but
glad to.
if you got a list of stuff that you keep track of, then I would love to
Totally.
check
Would
that
love
out.
to.
So, yeah, and if this goes well, then maybe we'll invite you back and we can do a little bit more.
I would
kind
love
of
to
talk about some of the details. Yeah, you could recommend some of those
I'd be glad to.
periodicals, and,
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So sorry, I'm just trying to use a little bit of it as I have it. I am. That's a word. That's a word I struggled with a little bit. Like I obviously know the word, but it was like I couldn't type it right. That's one of those that Duolingo just marked me wrong because I missed the I or I missed the O or I missed something, and it's just like, oh my god, it's just like you're drilling this into my fucking brain at this point. I got so annoyed. I get so annoyed. It's like, I know it's wrong, but it's not that wrong. Just give me partial credit and let me move on.
Yeah,
please,
yeah. No, I know. There, but
and it's funny, like some typos that'll let you take, like if you just miss a letter, but if it's a los versus lost thing, even though that could be a typo, they mark it incorrect because that's like part of what they are like.
That's part of what they're trying to teach you.
So I get it. It's just annoying. It's just annoying, especially when the sentence is long enough that I can't like keep it in my head all at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm just bitching about the apps.
No.
Like I'm sure you have some experience with this in other contexts.
I'm very familiar with this. Trying to explain my way out of something.
Yeah,
I do this a lot.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, and welcome to a new podcast, No Habla Español. It's called. Not really, don't worry. But you will understand the joke presently, my friends.
Yes.
You can hear Daniel, my friend Daniel, the co-host of this podcast. Yes, you probably know who I mean, chuckling in the background. Daniel, what on earth are you laughing about?
You did misconjugate the verb hablar. It is hablo. It is yo hablo español. And technically, it would be no yo hablo español would be the appropriate translation. So
there's a reason why I made these mistakes.
Yeah, so of course.
No yo hablo español.
So even I can correct them. Yeah, no. I think Craig and I had the immediate response of like, okay.
It was pretty funny. Yeah,
it was pretty funny. Yeah. So anyway.
All right.
But yeah, no. I'm here. Yo estoy aquí. I'm here and ready to talk.
Good. But this is, in fact, I fooled you, listeners. It is, in fact, the podcast I Don't Speak German. And we, in a recent episode, in fact, I think it's our last mainline episode, we did a little bit of talking about learning languages. And it occurred to Daniel and me also that we'd have our friend Craig Johnson back onto the show to talk to us a little bit about things like that. Craig, how are you doing?
Hey, folks. I'm doing all right. I actually recently returned from a trip in Latin America,
nice.
For academic work, so definitely ready to talk about this.
Whereabouts? Where did you come from?
I was in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
In Buenos Aires, okay, yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. No, Argentina is one of the like short list of countries I'd like to visit.
It's really lovely if you eat beef, and coming from the United States, it isn't as if the politics is so categorically, catastrophically worse at this point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I hear you. Every time I've seen photos of Argentina, I'm just like, I just want to visit Argentina. It's always seems lovely.
Stunningly beautiful. Southern Argentina has incredible natural beauty. Buenos Aires is one of my favorite cities in the world.
Sure.
Lovely. Highly recommend.
Yeah. No, I hear you. All right.
So Daniel, why don't you introduce the subject of today's discussion?
Sure. So we are, I put out a post on Bluesky. I didn't pull it up. I don't have the exact text, but something to the point of I've been learning Spanish I started in January, just like trying to pick up Spanish and a couple other languages as well. I've been kind of dabbling a bit. Just for me, it was partly just, it was a memory aid. I've found I've gotten older. And as I've gotten older, I've just kind of like, I don't kind of come to things as fast as I used to. And playing memory games was doing stuff, but I thought, why not do this in a way that's actually useful to me and actually try to learn a language? And I took a couple of years of Spanish in high school. That was 30 years ago now when I took Spanish. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna come back to it. And then I also kind of realized as I was coming back to it, I was like, well, obviously there's a political angle to this too. And I think that was the point of the Bluesky post was, look, I wouldn't blame anybody for not doing it. I didn't do it for years and years and years. But I mean, I think there is a real positive political case to make, like a leftist case to make for learning the language, the minor languages of your region, the languages of the people who are oppressed in your area. So that, for, just mutual understanding and mutual like respect. I mean, I think there is something to that. And so here in the US, that is clearly Spanish. That would vary a lot depending on where you are in the world. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about with Craig and Jack today. So I don't know, Craig, I mean, you're kind of nodding along and you reposted that Bluesky post. So with some positive commentary. So I was just, and that's why I reached out to you. It's like, hey, let's do this as an episode sometime. So Craig, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad to be talking about this and to be talking with you two again. I absolutely agree. Like it seems fairly transparent to me that, especially if you're in the United States, that learning Spanish is a pretty clear political, I mean, if not imperative, it's at least something that will help you be a better organizer, be a better political actor, be a better consumer of news. I mean, there's all sorts of really real benefits in addition to the fact that it's just like a good and enriching experience to learn a new language for a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you are monolingual, it's one of the better things you can do for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
To become conversant in a second or third language.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, I don't know, for me, like looking at the footage in LA and looking at the right-wing response to the footage from out of LA where, they're flying Mexican flags and as if that's obviously this like horrendous thing to do. I mean, believe me, one of the first things I plan to do when I get into my new place is to buy a big Mexican flag and hang it prominently in my bedroom or whatever. It's going to be a thing. It's like a political statement at this point,
Being criticized for flying Mexican flags by people who fly the flags of the worst treason in the history of the United States.
Yes, fly Confederate flags. Yes,
absolutely. For slavery, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know, like I guess presumably given your research interest, you are fluent in Spanish. Have you been assessed? Do you have like an idea about how fluent, how well you speak it? Or
I have been assessed. So before the podcast, we were chatting about our Spanish abilities, and you mentioned, the sort of like A1, A2, B1, B2 levels,
the CEFR levels.
Yeah. So just for listeners who aren't familiar with this comes out of European language learning classification.
It's Common European Framework. So I think it is originally French. So, and I don't speak any French. So
so the concept here is that there are basically 6 tiers to language knowledge, and they range from A1, which is like, maybe I could do some touristy type stuff in this place. Like I can say please and thank you, and I can point at things and say this, not that, or where's the bathroom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
A2 is more like I can tell you where I'm from and what my name is, and have like small little conversations.
I kind of think A2 is often like grammar constructions more so than that, where you're using more passive voice, you're using more past tense, you're using a lot of the really early stuff is, like my name is Daniel,
exactly.
Whereas I come from Alabama is a little bit more A2ish or I used to live in Alabama, like that sort of thing would be.
Yeah, like having different tenses and stuff. B level is like you could perform, and again, this is my understanding of it. I'm not a linguist particularly, but the way it's been told to me when I was learning languages was that B1 and B2 are essentially like, could you have something like a professional life in this language?
Yeah.
Like, if you got a job in a country, could you work in this language? So some of it's pretty specialized, or, it's like, can you be in a meeting? Can you read a newspaper? Or like that kind of stuff. And then C is the point at which you could be pretty fluidly incorporating it into your everyday life. You can read fiction. You could watch a stand-up special and get the jokes. You could go on a date,
Well, and a lot of this is like culturally dependent as well. Like, because that's a lot of what you learn, like past like kind of the A2 level. Once you get, a lot of people will say like B2-ish is kind of like you are fluent. You are, a lot of people would consider you fluent at B2. Like you are speaking the language perfectly well. C1 is like kind of university, like native speaking level. And then C2 is like university level. And to be clear, a lot of people who have university degrees, like I have a bachelor's degree I am a native level speaker of English. I speak American. I have a university degree. I don't think I could pass a C2 exam. A C2 exam is deliberately difficult.
Yes. Yeah. C2 exam is like, that stuff is hard.
Yeah, you've got to be able to have like in-depth, fluid conversations around a multitude of highly complex, like political and scientific topics to like pass that exam. Because the reason you take that, just to highlight, is because you're going to go on and be an interpreter, like a high-level interpreter at the United Nations, or like that level of work. Yeah,
or something.
Yeah, exactly. So
whereas like the thing that if you're learning a language and you're trying to incorporate it into your everyday life, what you're aiming for is maybe something like B2, something like that. When I've been evaluated, when I've been at my best with Spanish, I've been around C1. That's what my evaluation.
That's kind of what I would expect. Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, for other listeners, I have a PhD in Latin American history, and so I do a lot of research and work in Latin America. I read Spanish all the time, and maybe this is jumping the gun a little bit, but when it comes to learning languages, one of the things that I really suggest to people, like as a great first step, and I mean, I guess it depends on what you want to do. Like, for me, I wanted to be a reader, a consumer of language and ideas, of books, and so for me, it was reading. Reading was the most important thing. As a PhD student in history, that was the most important thing, right?
Absolutely.
And so, getting my academic Spanish up there was the most important thing. And I'm also somewhere in the B range in Portuguese. And that similarly, it's the same sort of process of like, you just got to sit down with a book that is a relatively appropriate reading level for you. So maybe that's the newspaper, like whatever a nation's equivalent of a New York Times type thing, La Nación, maybe in Argentina's case, or El País, if we're talking about Spain. Sit down with it. And like, if you're on your computer, try to read it without translating it. If you don't know a word, check up that word, look it up. But I'm an old fogey. I'm an oldie time guy. So my real recommendation is get a physical book and get a physical dictionary. And like, this is what you're doing. Like once you've already learned the language somewhat and you're like trying to improve, get a physical book, maybe a young adult fiction book. Something that's at the reading level.
Something you hear a lot is read Harry Potter in your target language. Obviously, we don't support Harry Potter for a lot of other reasons.
But
just don't pay for it,
right?
Yeah. Like something at that level, exactly. Like something that's written for something that was appropriate for you to read when you were 10 or 12 is like a great place to be once you're trying to like launch yourself between A and B.
And I think something you also know well is kind of part of that,
it's really
because
helpful. It's really
like for me, something like Ender's Game or like some of the like Isaac Asimov short stories would be kind of like in that vein, where something I just know really well and could just like plow through. And I know the plot, so I'm just going through it. Lately, I've been sorry, this is again a little bit jumping the gun. I've been watching Spanish, like probably not The Simpsons, like dubbed into Spanish.
That's ideal.
It's definitely above my level, but again, I know those first few seasons well enough that I can just follow along and I find myself just mumbling along with it. Like they use a word and I go lo siento or whatever. And I just find myself like, as you start plugging into your brain, I just find myself just mumbling in Spanish, like just during my day. Just talking to myself, not even necessarily forming thoughts, but just like lo siento is bien, is muy bien, is and just sort of like getting the sounds out. So it's just one of those things I just find myself doing like without even thinking about it. And that's a sign. I think that's a sign of like you're just at that point you're putting enough in your brain. You're not just like putting in your 15 minutes a day and like going about your day. It's got to be it. And sorry, you know it better than I do. I'm just like what I've learned just from like following like language learning like communities online for a while. Because I always kind of had the inclination to do this and just never sat down and did it until January this year. I wish I'd started like 2 years ago, honestly. But the one thing that they say is like you really have to do it daily. Like it has to be like part of your routine. And if it's 5 minutes, if you can do 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day is not enough, but it is better than not doing 5 minutes a day. Doing 5 minutes a day is better than doing 15 minutes every 3 days. It's kind of where I would land on that, Oh,
I agree. Doing some of it every day is good. So like for me, when I live in the United States, and this means that there aren't necessarily opportunities for me to speak or hear Spanish spoken all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do is I read the news in Spanish every day. I'm
going to pick that up. That's really good advice. I should start picking it up for sure. Yeah.
I mean, this is, and again, I talked about jumping the gun, but we're just having a conversation. There isn't like a particular direction we're going here. When it comes to what you get out of learning a second or third language, and especially, as you said, Daniel, about like learning a language of people who are particularly politically disadvantaged or oppressed or racially oppressed in the place that you live is, if you've ever found yourself complaining about like the New York Times or CNN being like this like terrible centrist force, then it's like, okay, well, then you can, like, other countries have actual leftist newspapers.
Yes, indeed. And particularly in Spanish, you will find them very quickly.
Yes, you can just read them. And they will have leftist news in them. And they'll be very honest and direct and clear about stuff in a way that U.S. news is not. And I mean, like these newspapers often have political affiliations, which are themselves maybe problematic or something that you need to keep your wits about you on. Like, for example, in Argentina, I read a series of Peronist newspapers, and Peronism is a very complicated political movement. It has its ups and downs. It has its problems. It has its ins and outs. But it's just like a different perspective,
absolutely.
And it's a very helpful corrective to what you get in the United States. This sort of like extruded meat paste type news that we get mostly as Americans.
Yes, no, absolutely, especially from like the big outlets. It's either the meat paste or it's the absolutely unhinged propaganda coming from the site formerly known as Twitter these days.
Exactly,
it's like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or God forbid, Facebook.
Oh my God. No.
So yeah, I mean, I guess again we kind of jumped into, and I do want to talk about other languages a little bit. I mean, so you say you have Spanish, you have Portuguese. Did you ever study anything else, or it's kind of
I can read some French, but again, that's basically for academic purposes. And my reading French is more or less me translating as I'm going. Like I'm not reading it fluidly at all.
Sure, no, absolutely.
Same with Italian. So I've cheated. All of mine are Romance languages.
Right? Yeah.
They're
well, I mean, if you're C1 in Spanish, then you kind of you have a big heads up. I mean, Portuguese is also. I mean, it's like if you're high level Spanish, you're basically. Sorry, I'm insulting. I'm not trying to be insulting to Portuguese speakers. Portuguese is Spanish with an accent. It's on some level,
I mean, in many ways, it is like the grammar is incredibly similar.
Yeah.
Coming from English, and this is something that you'll find in a bunch of Romance languages, right? Yeah. The things that are different between Spanish and English are generally also different.
Yeah.
Between English and other Romance languages, and usually they're sort of like different in a similar way. And, if you I have the privilege of having, university education and a postgraduate degree in the United States and in English, I mean. And so that means that I'm very familiar with, I was taught a lot of sort of, like complicated GRE type words, right?
Yes,
and a lot
absolutely.
of those come from Greek and Latin. And a lot of those words are the same in Spanish and Portuguese. So, like in the same word that like in the same way that there might be a complicated word in English that you wouldn't teach like a second grader,
right?
Like for example, ecumenicism or something like that, right?
Right.
That's just the same word, right?
Yeah,
it's not a different word in Spanish or Portuguese, right? You just have to learn the different ways that they construct like a gerund or an infinitive or something like that. But like usually the root of it is the same, and so. If you're learning a second or third language, and especially if you're going between English and a Romance language, so particularly if you're learning Spanish as an English speaker, what you'll probably find is that like it'll be the everyday words that'll be the hardest for you to figure out.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because governmental is the same word, right?
I have trouble with
right.
Just speaking for myself again at my level, low level. I have trouble sometimes with like articles and like constructions and like why is it like Ami and Kenton, or Ami and Kanto, etc. And why is it why does it have to be constructed that way? And that's like and so then I just Google it because I'm just like why is it doing this? And then
certainly.
it's like so literally like today I started working through like a Spanish grammar textbook because I'm like I think this is going to be pound for pound something that's going to help me personally like right now, is so that I can sort of at least get the sense of like how some of these grammatical constructions work. So that's been, I've been like kind of dabbling with different methods. So it's just one of those things where you just run into these things where it's just like, I don't know why it's this way. And we can talk about the apps. I don't know if you've ever tried any of the apps, but I've been trying a lot of that stuff. And so I have definite opinions about that. Jack, did you have anything to throw in here?
Yeah, I thought the beginnings of the political conversation that you started to have was really interesting. The idea of openness to other viewpoints, particularly viewpoints that are politically excluded in the Anglophone world in America, I think that's really interesting. I'm just interested in the idea of, particularly in the American context, and I think Spanish is a language that's it'd be worth anybody in the world learning because it's one of the world's biggest languages,
world's most spoken languages. Absolutely, it has like 600 or something million speakers.
It's not something that I knew, but in our little conversations about this, you've said that, and I looked it up, and it's like the 4th or the 5th most common language in the world after English, Mandarin, Chinese, Hindi. So that's, just anybody in the world, just in terms of the number of people that speak Spanish, but also particularly in the American context because of the proximity of the United States to Central and South America, and the number of people of that extraction and nationality and so on living in the United States. I'm interested in the idea of learning other languages as an act of solidarity in itself.
No, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, that's something we did when I think that was the reason we came here, and then I got distracted. So sorry about that.
Oh, no.
Just an anecdote about that. I remember reading a book by the historian Piers Brendan many years ago. It's a book about the period between the two wars. And he wrote about his father, I think, or it might have been his grandfather. It's a long time ago I read the book. And he said that his I think it was his father, at the time of the Spanish Civil War, he wanted to go out and join the international brigades in Spain. But for one reason or another, he felt that he couldn't do it. But as an act of solidarity, he decided to learn Spanish. That's always stuck in my head. So, yeah, that's something I find really interesting, that idea.
Well, and you see that, like language learning as an act of solidarity, of like the degree to which the Russian government has suppressed Ukrainian, over the long history, and the fact that speaking Ukrainian is actually it is an act of political defiance on even before the.
I think about Pinter's play Mountain Language as well.
Yeah, language as political act is definitely. That's definitely a very real truth, like even before Trump, all of these cries about people, white people screaming at people to speak American, right?
Oh yeah.
Being able to engage with somebody.
The fact that press 2 for Spanish is it drives people up in a rage. I always want to tell them, wait until it's press 2 for English, asshole.
Yeah. Incidentally, if you speak Spanish, it is sometimes easier to get somebody on the line.
Yeah, I can believe it. Yeah.
Although, if you do also speak English, you should not do that and take away the spot from somebody who needs it.
I was going to say that looks like you should go into our unethical life hacks.
That yes. When it comes to learning a language as an act of solidarity, as a political act, being able to engage with people in the language that they were raised in is one of the ultimate ways to show that you support their personhood, on a very simple level. In the United States, there's some complications about it, simply because you don't want to assume what languages a person speaks. Absolutely. Or what languages a person would be the most comfortable with. But this is a situation where, you might always ask, would you prefer to be talking with me in this language or that, or another language that I've just heard you speak? You don't want to make people be your practice, So ask people, engage with them what they want. But when it comes to solidarity with, or just knowing what is happening in other countries, like being able to read about it in the language in which it is occurring is just, it's so fantastically different. It's so fantastically helpful. Like the number of times that I, read a US news source talking about the principal countries that I study, so Argentina, Chile, and Brazil, those are the ones that I study in my academic life, right? Sure. And so I pay particular close attention to the news, like the contemporary news out of those countries. The number of times that I encounter a US news story that is about those countries, and you think to yourself like, oh man, like who wrote this? Like where did they get this information? Where did they get this news? Who is it for? And like probably the person writing it speaks Spanish or Portuguese or something, but like it's written from a perspective that sort of, it just sort of like ends up presenting it as if it's from the outside, right?
Yeah.
And if you instead, essentially what it allows you to do is to, as best as you can, as a person who is not a native speaker of the language, as best you can sort of approach it sort of from the inside, like trying to understand how people think about themselves, how they present their own world. What's coming to mind about this is in the wake of the United States' bombing in Iran, people were sharing around the Anthony Bourdain episode where he went to Iran.
Oh yeah,
talking about like humanizing people, just like simply being present and just like seeing the world as other people do. And like obviously you can't fully do that; that's impossible.
Right.
But the humanizing aspect of it is huge, especially if you are in a relatively isolated or culturally monolithic part of the United States.
Yeah.
It can be really hard for people to understand that the world is big and different. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, and so when I told my relatives that I was going to be studying Argentina professionally, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm going there this July," they'd always be like, "Oh, is it like hot?
But is it safe?"
They would say, "Oh, is it hot? Is it safe?" And I would be like, "Well, it's on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
So it's winter. It's actually quite cold there." They would always be like, "Wait, really?" And then you realize like, well, most people in the United States believe that the entirety of Latin America is a desert until the Amazon, and then there's sort of like a question mark.
Yeah, I know.
Elsewhere, right?
That's something you also you get corrected if you play GeoGuessr. That's another thing because you do get to see a lot of, I mean, not to but you see a lot of the world, and you suddenly like, oh, this looks very different than I anticipated it looking. But yeah,
yes,
I kind of think most Americans think like south of El Paso is effectively a yellow filter goes over everything.
Yes.
And it really is just like deserts and then like occasional jungles. And like the idea that Argentina like spans so many lines of latitude, it's just like, it's bonkers. Argentina's a giant country. I mean, but Ushuaia is Argentina. Is Ushuaia in Argentina or Chile?
Ushuaia is in Argentina.
Okay,
it's
I thought it was Argentina. I didn't want to be wrong, so
there was. I mean, they almost went to war about that one. Yeah. So yeah,
Okay, so there's a political reason that I might have been slightly confused.
Yes, yes.
I was like 95% sure it was in Argentina, but I didn't want to like confidently state so.
Totally.
But no, it's literally the southernmost city above like a certain population thing in the entire world. It's it's practically in the Arctic Circle. Like I saw videos of people who went there,
yes,
and it's like, Memorado Station is like 200 miles that way. It's
if you want to go to Antarctica, first you go to Ushuaia.
Yes, exactly.
Like, almost universally.
Yeah. So that is a place I would very much like to visit. I think it looks fascinating to me. I have no reason to go there except just to say I've done it, but like it is something that yeah.
Same here.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you, but yeah, no, it does describe like the these places are large and diverse, and like learning Spanish is a way of interacting with that, at least even in the smallest ways, and again,
yes,
5 minutes is better. 5 minutes is better than 0 minutes, so you're obviously not going to be reading political pamphlets if you spend 5 minutes a day on Spanish. It'll take you 10 years to get to to even begin to be able to do that. But I mean, you could at least to be able to say hello and goodbye, and at least to be able to express some kind of solidarity. I mean, I work with the public, and occasionally, and I do run into people who speak Spanish as a first language on a pretty regular basis. They are almost universally also fluent in English, so there's no no question there. But I found even being able to even just hola, even just like how would you like what can I do for you today, and like that sort of thing. Just like, hey, is Spanish okay? Is Espanol bien? That sort of thing, and people like relax. Yeah. It really is like a thing of like it is. I don't know, like sorry, I'm not trying to be the white guy, like saying like you can do this, but I've done it and I see people like visibly relax and be like, oh, you're not one of the assholes, sort of thing, who's gonna like be mad at me if I trip up my infinitives in English, because English is a really hard language. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, the other thing here is that, like, speaking of political solidarity, the United States is entering a period in which the government is literally disappearing people off the street.
Yep, absolutely.
And in major part, the people that they are targeting for this are people either who are themselves from originally Spanish-speaking countries or predominantly Spanish-speaking countries, or whom the disappearers, ICE, these, unmarked guys who they assume, because of their skin or because of their affect or for some other reason, they assume that they are from a Spanish-speaking country, or that they assume that they're from ethnic groups that are from Spanish-speaking countries, right? They're racially profiling people. And so being able to, like, if you were present and trying to witness one of these events, trying to record it, if you were trying to record what happened in order to take place in some sort of like legal action, or someday some sort of like truth and reconciliation committee, because like we're going to need something like that, right?
Yes, lots of ifs involved in that one, but
yes. God willing, we end up with one of those, right? Or if you're trying to stop it when it's happening, like being able to communicate with people in multiple languages is just simply better.
Yes.
It's just simply better for you and for the people who are being targeted by this. There are just so many benefits to it. And organizing with people who another big thing that I want to make sure that I talk about here is that, like, when you learn coming from the United States, learning Spanish, and certainly the two languages here will be different in different places.
Absolutely, yeah.
But are an English speaker in the United States and you are learning Spanish for some political solidarity purposes, like, not only will you be able to engage with actual physically present human organizers and people who are in need of political assistance, or who you're helping defend against government action or whatever, like, not only are there real living physical human beings that you can engage with, not only is there news for you to consume, but there's also entire extremely robust, very powerful political currents and traditions that you can engage with. I mean, if you are in the United States today, you will know that, like, the May Day protests as like organizing labor events emerged first in the United States, yes. But in the United States today, they're primarily run as immigrant rights marches, because people came from Latin American countries where May Day is a holiday, and they understand that immigrant rights are workers' rights. It's a very clear, transparent connection here, and so it just connects you to whole universes of extremely successful, extremely powerful leftist and progressive organizing that otherwise you wouldn't be able to really access. You wouldn't really be able to get close to. It's one of the better things that I've done for my life in that capacity.
No, absolutely. I have not reached that point, unfortunately, but it's definitely, I work with the public. I guess I can reveal this. I work in a print copy center, so I make copies on paper for a living. That's what I do. And for a while we used to get UFW workers, coming in to make 600 color flyers for their for stuff, and it would be 300 in black or 300 in English and 300 in Spanish, or that sort of thing. And it does again it's like you're just suddenly connected to that just so much more if you can feel like I have a little bit of ability to communicate in that person's native language. It just feels so much better. Oh, also, I just wanted to say we just got a New York Times news alert, because I'm embarrassed as I subscribe to the New York Times because it's important to get your news somewhere. Supreme Court allows Trump to deport migrants to third countries. So as we are recording this, I just got that news alert. So this is very, very salient.
Unfortunately,
to what's going on in the news right now. So yeah.
Oh, there's some really terrifying stuff happening, not just in the United States, but around the world. And yeah, learning a second or third language is just a really, really incredible, powerful act. Whenever I'm finding myself sort of like thinking about how much work learning a language is, because it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah, I think that's something I do want to cover some of that at the end here. But
whenever I find myself thinking about how much work it is, I think about Karl Marx. I think about Marx sitting down with a Russian dictionary, being like, well, I guess I got to learn Russian now, like, because it's the late 19th century and like people are getting into me in Russia, and I gotta be able to correspond with them, I guess. And like, and
I haven't got anything else to do. Like, so
yeah, exactly. It's not like I have 4 more volumes of Capital that I promised people or something like that. But it's something to remind yourself that like it's hard to do, but the thing is, if it's hard for you, it's hard for the other people that you are implicitly asking to learn
English. It's that English is so much
learn.
harder. If English is not your first language, English is so much harder than Spanish as a second language. It is.
It's one of the harder languages on earth.
Yeah,
to learn.
And the fact that it's such a lingua franca of the world. I love that I say lingua franca.
Yes, but it is.
It's such a lingua franca of the world. There's not an English phrase that means that, except we just adopt that term for it. That's so funny. The fact that like literally every educated person in the world learns some English. And so you just get to expect to walk into places. And of course you speak English, but English is freaking hard. I've been following, again, just on Reddit for a while, I've been following like English language learning communities. And like the questions these people have is like, well, why do you say it like this and not like that? Like they speak perfectly fine English, but they're asking so that, they're probably B2, ish. And they're still finding like these little like grammar rules. It's like, why do you say it this way? Or like post a screenshot of a meme and like, why is this meme funny? And that sort of thing. And it's like, and then you have, and then it takes like a linguistics degree to really like sit down and like explain, okay, this is why it's funny, it's fascinating stuff. It's really fascinating stuff.
I've definitely encountered, I've tutored English language learners a few times, in various contexts. And yes, English is quite hard. And so, that's another thing that gets me through it is to think to myself like, well, if I am saying that learning this other language is hard, it's too hard. If I think like, oh, that's too hard, I don't want to do it. That is me offloading work to somebody else.
Exactly. No.
Saying like, well, now you have to learn English in order for me to be able to communicate with you.
Exactly.
And if instead,
and I think it would be unreasonable to learn that. I had someone come to my counter once who spoke Kinyarwanda. Kinyarwanda is the national language of Rwanda. I think it's not unreasonable to say, I don't speak Kinyarwanda. Like I'm not going to learn for that one person I meet in the course of my life. But Spanish is like, there are like tens of millions of people living in the United States who speak Spanish as a first language. Like it is a significant minority language. You should, and again, I'm not like, I didn't get on this until I was 45 years old. So I'm not like blaming anybody for not doing it. But I really like, the more I've like studied Spanish, the more I've thought about it, the more I really do think like, if you're a leftist, you should speak a little Spanish. Like you really should. I think it's in the United States. Obviously that goes for, we have listeners from all over the world. So, I'm not pretending that that's the case everywhere, but I think certainly in North America, you should speak some Spanish. You should have some context for it. Like, I don't know, like, it's just, I don't know, like it seems, having not thought about it for a long time and then having started to do it and then realizing like how important it is, like in the process of doing it. And I think that was why I put that post up, was just because, like almost to hold myself accountable for this. It's like, I spent 2 years in high school learning Spanish, and I spent about 2 years, a little more than 2 years, learning Latin. And I liked Latin more, partly because you don't have to learn to speak or listen to Latin. It's reading, but also it's very like grammar heavy. And so you're learning like case endings, so it's a declined language. So you're spending a lot of time, it felt more like a puzzle to me. And so it was like, it was more fun and more interesting. And, when you learn Spanish, you're speaking, I'd like to order paella at the restaurant. And when you learn Latin, it's like, and then the Romans conquered Gaul. It's just a very different kind of thing you're reading.
Very different feeling.
Yeah. So, and I will say that learning a little bit of Latin and knowing that, like what you were saying about like cognates from like more complicated words, and having that like the grammatical structure and like knowing how inflected languages work, even from a dead language, really helped me a lot and kind of in all my kind of future like learning. It's really like, kind of having that structure down. And so, I mean, you say what get a physical textbook and get a physical dictionary and, sit down and read kids' books is kind of like your kind of first, that would be the way you'd say to start.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on what you want to do.
Sure.
If you want to be able to read, then yeah, the thing to do is yes, exactly. Yeah, the thing to do is to sit down with either, maybe a young adult book or maybe a physical textbook. Pick up a learning Spanish textbook, pick up a learning Arabic textbook, something like that. Something that's been really helpful for me that isn't in vogue anymore in language teaching. And so pedagogically, somebody might get mad at me if you're listening to this and you are a language instructor, but it's something that's been very helpful for me. It's something they used to make. They're called graded readers or graduated readers. And so it'll be a single book. And the first thing in the book is like a 1-story page that's sort of like, C-Spot Run, C. Jane Run type stuff. And then by the end, you're, reading, it's like a maybe 6th, 7th, 8th grade level, young adult fiction, something like that. Sure. And that to me has felt like a very natural way. That was something that I used with Portuguese. It was like, okay, I sat down with an English Portuguese dictionary. I sat down with the graded reader and I moved my way through. Having Spanish and English, I had a big leg up, but starting from Spanish, that would also work. If your goal is to talk to people, then again, no surprise, you got to talk to people. Yeah. You want to have a foundation there. So, some of the apps can help. I've, used them sometimes. There's also just there's resources online, maybe you could be like, I'm going to make little flashcards of the 100 most common verbs and the 1,000 most common nouns, right? And that'll be really helpful. That's something that I did, again, for Portuguese to sort of get myself centered on, differences between Portuguese and Spanish, because there are quite a few, especially when it comes to sort of everyday nouns and everyday.
So obviously, I do not actually believe you can Portuguese is just Spanish with an accent. I was joking,
Well, whenever I met Argentines in Argentina, that is a joke that they made too. Yes, so
solidarity with the Argentinian crowd, apparently.
Well, usually the joke is that Brazilians understand Argentines, but Argentines don't understand Brazilians. That's usually the joke that people make.
Fair enough.
Putting the advantage on the side of the Brazilians, who are like, well, yeah, we can understand Spanish and they don't understand Portuguese.
For them, Spanish is the language of their oppressors, because Spanish is so much more spoken in South America. Yeah, I never really thought about it that way. That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Brazil's the most populous and in many ways the most wealthy.
Yes.
But that the wealthiness of Brazil is something that's relatively recent, I guess. Maybe only in this last century. History recent,
Sure, yeah.
But when it comes to, if you want to speak a language, you want to be able to have conversations with people, there is no substitute for having conversations with people. Yeah. So one option there is go out and take a class at a community college. If you live in a major urban area in the United States, there will probably be one or several, private institutions that will offer you classes. And, they might be, some of them will be like, hey, this is a class for maybe you want to go do medical work in this country and you want to learn a bunch of medical terms, or a legal class, or maybe it's just a conversation class and it's just going to be you, an instructor, and maybe 2 or 3 other people, and you're just chatting.
Yeah.
Again, if you live in a major urban area in the United States, there will probably be events in your city that are these are events for people who are practicing languages. And so you come and you're trying to practice your Spanish. Other people are maybe trying to practice their English or practice another language. And you can, cooperate and collaborate in that way. I know that there is a couple of those in the United States. If you have the privilege of being able to go to a country in Latin America, even for a couple weeks or a month or something, and take an immersive class, that is a big benefit. That's something that I did back in college, and it was really helpful for me in terms of really cementing my Spanish.
Yeah. I do think that helps more after you've got a little bit under your belt. It's not like a beginner move. Now, so the other language I'm really trying to put some time into every day is Czech. And that's because I lived in Prague for a month back in 2010. And I kind of fell in love with it. And so I heard it around me every day. And I learned a lot. I just learned a lot from reading street signs and reading going places, and Narodny means this, and and so and I found picking that up. Actually, when I started doing Russian, it's very similar. A lot of the words transferred over. So it was very much a. In fact, I learned I can't do both because they interfere in my head. Maybe if I get pretty good at one, I can learn the other. But it was just impossible to do both.
People always told me to people always told me not to practice Spanish and Portuguese at the same time. And it is definitely true. When I was in Argentina, I would occasionally encounter people who were Brazilian and like speak Portuguese with them. And that was pretty tough.
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
Because I would just end up speaking Spanish and apologize. And they'd be like, no, I get it.
I think the key to that is like, you need to get like pretty good at one before you start learning the other is kind of the advice that I see. I will say for myself, Spanish is also like, if you speak English, Spanish is the easiest language to get into in the fucking world. It is. There are so many. I would not disagree with anything that Craig said, although I haven't done a whole lot of that. But having even like my high school classes have given me a lot of like. There's a little like grammar in the back of my head. There's a lot of stuff that I just can't bring up because I haven't used it in 30 years. But like going through the lessons and going through stuff, I find myself like really kind of like. Finding stuff and going, oh, that's how that works. And now I finally got the explanation for why it was that way all those many years ago, etc. But I do find, there are YouTube channels, there's this, and some of these things get a little bit like, I won't talk about the details because I'm not good enough at Spanish to really be able to say like, this is something that I would recommend, except like do it every day. I'm doing Duolingo. I'm doing Spanish on Duolingo. I paid for it and I paid for it in January. I'm going to keep it until my subscription runs out, and if I still feel like it's giving me usage, then I'll keep it up. I will say of the courses on Duolingo, of the ones I've tried, Spanish is by far the best. It is head and shoulders above even German. I never tried French. I heard French is also very good. French just annoys me for other reasons. So all those freaking vowels, I just can't do French.
It can be tough.
I will do the consonant clusters of Czech before I even begin to do the like super precise vowels of French. It's just every time I even look at French, it just like it annoys me like to know it.
Another thing I would definitely recommend, and there are a couple sites for this. I've used one in the past called Verbling.
Okay.
It's a site that connects you to a private language tutor.
Yeah, I think Italki is kind of the big one right now.
Yes,
and that's. I'm planning to do that as soon as I have a little bit more stable employment. That's kind of my goal.
Yeah, exactly. It does cost money, but because of exchange rates, it is possible to get, an hour-long lesson for, the price of a sandwich, perhaps in a major urban area in the United States. And if you can swing that, it is helpful. And it also is literally paying people from the who live in the country.
Like some of the top end that I've seen is like $30 an hour, which is really not much. It's really not much. And that's with some of these people have like they have certificate like C2 certifications in like 6 languages or something. And of course, that's a person whose expertise I would absolutely be worth paying that for. But a lot of times you can find it for $10 for 30 minutes and that sort of thing. And
exactly.
One of the reasons I want to do it is it will give you like instant speaking practice with somebody who is literally paid to listen to you and to help you, which really feels better than like trying to accost people on the street and force them to teach you Spanish.
Certainly. Yes. And you can tailor what you want, you can say like, hey, I'm just getting over the hump of like actually speaking and like, I'm nervous about it. And so like, please don't correct me until I'm done talking. Or you can say like, hey, actually, please just tell me, hey, hold up. And you conjugated that verb wrong, or whatever, which is what I ask my tutor to do, because I'm a masochist, I guess.
What I find is really annoying to me lately is I've been doing my Duolingo lessons and I've been trying to not translate, to just do it in Spanish and to not like translate it. And so I turned off the word bank, and so I like type it out. I do Duolingo on my computer, not on my phone. I find that's like much more useful, and it forces me to actually like type in the language. I'm not speaking it, but I am like typing in it, and so I'm getting like that kind of practice. What I find is like I will often make like minor typos, and then it marks me wrong. Where I got the other part that I was like focusing on, like making sure that these two endings match, or making sure the grammar works, and then like I accidentally typed los instead of los, and that was completely because that part of the sentence I was just doing by rote and I didn't go back and reread it because I'm also trying to engage it with speed so that it's not so and then I make the same mistake 4 times because do the same sentence 4 times and make a different minor mistake each time, and I just want to be like, just let me pass this fucking sentence, please. So your mileage may vary on that, but and it often is something where I knew the right answer but I just typed it wrong. I just hit the wrong and that's annoying, but sorry, that's a me problem. But
one last thing I want to say about practicing and avenues for practice, and this is another one where your mileage may vary. If this isn't your thing, maybe it wouldn't work. But we've been talking a lot about like practice that looks like homework, right? A tutor, a book, a dictionary. Like, oh no, but like there's so many other things. Watch television in Spanish,
particularly like kids television. I was thinking about like Disney Plus translates a bunch of their stuff into Spanish. Exactly. If you have the Disney Plus subscription, which you may or may not feel politically about that, I live in a household. We just have a Disney Plus subscription. It has a lot of like cool stuff. I said earlier I was watching The Simpsons in Spanish.
Yes, Simpsons is a great option.
I find that it's a little bit complicated. Like some of the grammar constructions are a little bit complicated. And it's also like the subtitles don't match the speaking because the subtitles are meant for one group of people and the dub is meant for another. But I find turning them both on and just sort of like comparing them to each other just casually, I find that that's been useful for me. I've only done a few episodes, but that's been it gives me a sense of it. But like Disney movies, watch your favorite Disney movies. You can watch. I was watching a little bit of Lilo and Stitch, which is like my favorite Disney movie. I watched the first 20 minutes of that. I just did it in Spanish. I know that movie pretty well. And it can be, and obviously it's like, it's tough to tell like a 30-year-old, like, go read C Spot Run in Spanish. That's because that stuff, part of it is that stuff feels embarrassing. It gets boring. I mean, it just gets to the point where like this, I'm not interested in this content. And so basically I think really what you have to do, you have to find something that works for you. And I think that's what I was meaning by there are just so many resources for Spanish, I'm learning Czech. I said I'm learning Czech, and Czech is like so much harder because there's just not a lot of stuff out there. The beauty of Czech is if you are learning it, you can reach out to because it's a minority language, because it's a small language, there are people who will kind of teach it to you for free or for very cheaply. There are like resources for doing that. But the idea of just being able to like turn my favorite TV show and put it into Czech is just not a thing, you have to really go out and seek out content.
Something that's really worked for me for Spanish and Portuguese is I watch anime. Anime is already translated into English. If I'm going to be, reading subtitles or listening to a dub already, then like just do that in the target language, in the language that you're trying to learn. So if you are already, say, watching a German TV show or like, one of those like Scandinavian cop dramas, then like that's probably dubbed or subbed into Spanish in the European market anyway, like check that out. Netflix has a huge variety of shows that are in Spanish.
Netflix does a weird thing because they actually like CGI the mouths of a lot of stuff.
So they do?
I haven't
seen. Oh my God.
I was watching I watched a documentary about this at one point about like how they do this. But I tried Ocean's 11 because I was watching another George Clooney movie and I was like, oh, I really like that. I really like that first Ocean's 11 movie. And I was like, put it on in Spanish, because I know that movie really well. And it is so bizarre watching like the mouth moves try to match the Spanish as opposed to the English.
That's terrible.
So
that's terrible.
I watched the first like 3 minutes and I'm like, hey, this is too hard for me. Like it's just I know kind of where like I could do The Simpsons because it's fairly simple constructions. And oh my God, like episode 2, there's like a Scrabble game being played. And so it's so much fun watching the originally English language thing done in Spanish, but then they're spelling all the words in English. So it's like the Simpsons in this universe are playing Scrabble. They speak Spanish fluently, but they're playing Scrabble in English, which suddenly makes some of those jokes make a little bit more sense of like, oh, I don't know that word in English. Like it's like, okay, no, sorry, just a fun thing. It was like I forgot that was there until it was there, and then I'm like, oh my God, like this.
Speaking of, and it's interesting that you brought up one of the elephants in the room in terms of language learning, which is AI, right?
Oh yeah.
You might get somebody telling you like, well, why would you need to learn another language? There's going to be like instant translation, whatever, blah 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 blah. First of all, no, that's just like probably, as far as I understand it, not going to happen in like a perfectly robust way. Certainly
Google
not
Translate is better than you would have any reason to think it is.
Yeah.
If what you want to do is
Google Translate is pretty incredible.
If you want to do is read street signs and get like a basic gist of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Google Translate is very incredible as a tourist. It'll probably get you pretty far.
When I had that young woman speaking Kenya Rwanda to me, Google Translate had Kenya Rwanda. I could type to her and she could read it, but I could tell the translation was not great because she couldn't understand what I was, she puzzled it out and like typed back at me. But it was like, so, I'm sure for Spanish it's much better, but still it's
the translations can be very good.
Yeah.
But what I mean is that like if you are learning a language for a political purpose, And, maybe, for example, you're doing stuff, you're communicating on Signal because you want your communication to be as, secure and as private as possible.
And then just show it to Google. Yes.
Then obviously you cannot put it into a translation algorithm.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You need to be doing that in your own brain.
Yes.
Additionally, right, just like as a general principle of trying to rely as little as possible on systems that are owned by people who are opposed to you and your interests.
Yes.
It's just a general principle to try to be able to not rely on that. Obviously this isn't me telling you not to use Google Translate. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
When I encounter a word and I don't know what it is.
Of course.
Of course.
Oh, yeah, I Google words all the time, and I try not to keep it open next to me. I'll always I open the tab and Google it and just go I can't I know that word, I just can't remember it. What is it again?
Yeah.
Just so I can move on.
But all of which is to say, just while that might be something that can be helpful, sometimes it shouldn't be something that you should rely on. And again, even if AI translation becomes note perfect, full on colloquial speech ideal, you still couldn't use it for organizing purposes.
Absolutely.
You still can't.
Well,
that means you still need
it is kind of a mark of disrespect to the people you're trying to organize.
Exactly.
I'm going to speak to you from on high using this techno, this techno option instead of actually speaking to you as you would speak to each other. I mean, so there is that element as well. I mean, obviously, if you're organizing, it's better than any organizing is better than no organizing. But if you are trying to, if we are political actors and we are trying to act politically in the world, that means interacting with human beings and not machines, on a fundamental level,
I will say, when it comes to communication, I have heard from some organizing friends in the past about actions organized at extremely diverse workplaces that were organized exclusively in emoji.
Yeah, no, I would believe it. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Pretty incredible stuff. But all of which is to say that communication is good. Do it as best you can. Learn another language.
And you will, this is something that I see, this is something that I found, you will find pretty quickly if the method you're learning isn't working for you. And again, just speaking for Spanish, there are so many other options out there. There are so many YouTube channels. There's so much advice you can get from people. If something isn't working for you, it isn't working for you. And if it is working for you, then keep pursuing that, because nobody has the key. There's not also something I did want to highlight. I think you mentioned it earlier, but I did want to just highlight it. This is a slow process. This is not something anybody who sells you're going to learn in 90 days, you're going to be fluent in 90 days. You're not even going to be conversational in 90 days. You're going to be reading C-Spot Run in 90 days, realistically.
Yeah.
Depending on how hard your language is. But Spanish, as an English speaker, Spanish is pretty easy. You will be even lower in Mandarin Chinese if you try to do that. So anybody trying to pretend that that's happening is selling you, it's not worth the paper it's written on. And so, look for things that are, that realistically tell you, you're going to spend thousands of hours on this. To get good at it, you're going to spend thousands of hours on it. And I think that's something that, something that people should just have realistically in their heads when they start the project. So
sounds good.
Okay. Well, thanks guys for that very interesting discussion. And yeah, I that was fascinating to listen to. Thank you ever so much. And Craig, thanks for coming on the show. You are always and continuingly welcome to come back on anytime you want to.
Talk.
Yeah.
Lovely to speak with both of you. Okay. Again, fortunately, this time it was actually about something nice to talk about.
Oh yeah.
It was.
Give me a couple of years. We'll do it in Spanish. How about that?
That sounds great. That sounds wonderful.
Okay. Yeah. It'll be a while. But I'll try that. I'm setting that as a goal. We'll do an episode in Spanish, 2027 or so.
In the meantime, everybody, you're going to have to continue to tolerate listening to us in English. Or you could just stop listening, I suppose. Nobody's forcing you.
As long as you keep donating to the Patreon, that's the important part.
Yeah, that's really all we care about.
I don't really mind if you stop listening, so long as you keep supporting.
We do this for the money. It's a good job we don't do this for the money, isn't it? Really. Although I'm very grateful for whatever comes in.
It does help.
Yes, very much so. Okay, well, everybody, thanks ever so much for listening, and we will be back with you quite soon with some more language of various types. Until then,
probably English,
goodbye.
But yes,
probably. Yeah. Jack here, dropping in at the very end to tell you where you can find Craig, because professional that I am, I forgot at the end of this recording session to give him an opportunity to promote his work. Craig has a podcast called 15 Minutes of Fascism. You can find that in all the usual places. His Patreon is under the same name. He can be found on Bluesky at cajohnson-craig.bsky.social, and he has a new book out, How to Talk to Your Son About Fascism, from Routledge.